I saw a company who stood well guarded and firm, giving no countenance to those who would unsettle the established faith of the body. God looked upon them with approbation. I was shown three steps: the first, second, and third angel's messages. Said to my accompanying angel, woe to him who shall move a block or stir a pin of these messages. The true understanding of these messages is of vital importance. The destiny of souls hangs upon the manner in which they are received. If we look in our past history, it's a sacred history. And one name comes up, and that's Kellogg. He was moving blocks for sure, as it pertains to the personality of God and Christ. What about stirring pins, though? We don't even want to do that. We want to be meticulous about preserving this message, every little pin. The labors of Elder Simpson reminded me of the labors put forth in 1842 to 1844. There's that critical year again, 1842, the last presentation called The Return of the Spirit of Prophecy goes into that year a lot. So take a look at that video. It is uploaded on the channel. Again, the labors of Elder Simpson remind me of the labors put forth in 1842 and 1844. He uses the Bible and the Bible alone to prove the truth of his arguments. He presents a plain, quote, thus saith the Lord, close quote. Then if any oppose his words, he makes it plain that they must have their controversy not with him. He has large, lifelike representations of the beasts and symbols in Daniel and the Revelation, and these are brought forward at the proper time to illustrate his remarks. Now, why might that remind her of the labors put forth in 1842? Well, it was suggested by God. God prompted Charles Fitch to make a chart where he took the symbols and beasts from Daniel and the Revelation, put those on a chart with simple explanations, Bible verses, and that caused the people to be able to run to and fro. The time which the angel declares with a solemn oath is not the end of this world's history, neither of probationary time, but of prophetic time, which shall precede the advent of our Lord. For those who don't know the context of this quote, we read it a lot together. It's also in the last video that I was just mentioning. The context of this quote is Revelation chapter 10. There's a mighty angel. He has the little book that was sealed in Daniel chapter 12 open. It's the time of the end now. He has it open, and he declares that there shall be time no longer. But it's not the end of world history. It's not the end of probationary time either. It's the end of prophetic time, because we know this because at the end of the chapter, John takes the little book, he eats it. It's sweet in his mouth like honey because he loves the soon appearing of the Lord. The prophetic periods had shown that we were in the 6,000th year of world history in 1844, that the scattering of God's people was ending in 1844. And Gabriel had asked in Daniel chapter 12, which I just referenced, how long concerning these wonders, how long to the end of the world? And Christ says, when you've accomplished to scatter the power of the holy people. The Millerites had figured out, hey, we're in the 6,000th year of world history. The scattering is ending in this year. Also, the 2,300 days is ending in this year. They also had a Jubilee cycle that was ending in this year. The 1335 was terminating in this year. So they had all these prophetic periods harmoniously terminating. And so it was sweet in their mouth like honey because they truly loved the Lord. They were sanctified and ready to see him. However, he did not come back, and that caused a great disappointment. And it was said after he ate the little book, it was sweet in his mouth like honey, but it was bitter in his stomach. And then he's told to go and prophesy again to many nations, kindreds, tongue, and people. And Christ says this gospel shall be preached in all the world for a witness, and then the end shall come. They had done that. And so they're like, okay, then the end must be here. But that's why they have that bitter disappointment. It was bitter in their stomach, that little book, that message. And now they have to go and prophesy again. They have to take it one more time to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. So this is why the angel says, this is the end of time no more, is signifying the end of prophetic time, not the end of probationary time, not the end of world history. Continuing after that, that is, the people will not have another message upon definite time after this period of time, reaching from 1842 to 1844. There can be no definite tracing of prophetic time. The longest reckoning reaches to the autumn of 1844. In our last presentation, we showed in the year 1842 was the beginning of William Foyt's ministry, A Prophet is Back. And it was all about how there would be these 2 days where Christ would have to work because they were killing the prophets. And so we entered into a period where you don't see the gift of prophecy in the church. But God said after 2 days, he would revive them and bring back this gift. That was what the last presentation was about. So what's very interesting about this year 1842 is you see the ministry of a prophet in this year, and you also see the prophecies being made plain upon table and being comprehended by people. Isn't that interesting? So the prophecies are being made plain in this year. And then you also have the ministry of a prophet in this year. And this is what's causing revival. Let's look at one of William Miller's rules. Figures sometimes have 2 or more different significations. A day is used in a figurative sense to represent 3 different periods of time. Indefinite, definite, a day for a year, and a day for 1,000 years. So if you look through the Bible, sometimes a figure can mean this, sometimes a figure can mean that. Sometimes they can have more than one meaning. With a day, there's actually 3 different meanings, and we just read what those are. So remember that as we continue to study. A day can just be just a period of indefinite amount of time. It can mean a day for a year, or it can even mean a day for 1,000 years. Miller says if you put on the right construction, it will harmonize with the Bible and make good sense. Otherwise, it will not. And he gives some very important proof texts here. So for instance, 2 Peter 3:8 is a day for 1,000 years. Ezekiel 4:6, a day for a year. That's where you can find these various figures for a day. Miss White says those who are engaged in proclaiming the third angel's message are searching the scriptures upon the same plan that Father Miller adopted. Engaged present tense. The question is, are you under the banner of the third angel's message? Anybody can profess to be. Anybody can say that I believe in the third angel's message. I'm a Sabbath keeper. I believe in the advent of the Lord. Hence, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I believe in the gifts of the Spirit. I believe in the spirit of prophecy. I take good care of my health. I'm ready to see the Lord. I'm particular about various reforms. They can say that, they can profess that, but those who are actually engaged in proclaiming the third angel's message are searching the scriptures, are studying a certain way, and it's the same way that Miller was studying the Bible. Isaiah 28, verse 9 through and verse 10, and then skipping to verse 12, left side of the slide. Whom shall he teach knowledge? And whom shall he make to understand doctrine? For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line upon line, here a little and there a little, to whom he said, this is the rest wherewith ye may cause the weary to rest, and this is the refreshing, yet they would not hear. Blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. Blessed are the eyes that saw the things in 1843 and 1844. Those were the years of revival. Those were the years of refreshing. And they had a certain methodology of interpretation back then. And that methodology is what allowed them to arrive at knowledge and truth and be sanctified. Jeremiah 6:16 says, Thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the ways and see, and ask for the old paths, where is the good way? And walk therein, and ye shall find rest for your souls. So where do we get the rest? Where do we get the refreshing from? Remember last week, and this video is also up online, new light comes out of old light. We're being told here to ask for the old paths. New light is not independent of old light, but an unfolding of it. Those that reject the new never really had the old. The new light glorifies the old, doesn't undo it, doesn't reinterpret it. This is important when it comes to pushing the prophetic periods into the future, or getting another message based up on time, saying from this day, from this event to this event is going to be this amount of days, or from this date to this date, something is going to happen. That's a message based on time. We don't have that. Our message is based on the promises of God and implicit trust in those promises. Christ is coming soon. We need to get ready. He hasn't revealed it to any mortal when that happened, but we know the nearness based on prophetic events. Our message is based on events, not based on time. 2 Peter 3:8, but beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. Interesting. Don't be ignorant of this fact. This is important. This is something that God wants us to know. So I'm going to read Luke 13:31 through 35. The same day, there came certain of Pharisees, saying unto him, Get thee hence, and depart hence, for Herod will kill thee. And he said unto them, Go ye and tell that fox, Behold, I cast out devils, and do cures today and tomorrow, and the third day I shall be perfected. Nevertheless, I must walk today and tomorrow, and the day following, for it cannot be that a prophet perish out of Jerusalem. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, which killeth the prophets and stonest them that are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, as a hen doth gather her brood under her wings, and ye would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. And verily I say unto you, ye shall not see me until the time come when ye shall say, Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. So there's a prophetic period here. We have today and tomorrow, we have the third day. And so the question becomes, is it literal, a literal day, second day, third day? Is it a day for a year? Is it a day for 1,000 years, or is it an indefinite amount of time? And remember, according to Miller's rules, and we're going to study according, we're going to search the scriptures according to the same plan that Father Miller adopted. That signifies if we're engaged in proclaiming the third angel's message. And in this rule about understanding what a day is, how to understand which figure to use if there's more than one signification, if you put on the right construction, it will harmonize with the Bible and make good sense. Otherwise, it will not. So when we're studying Christ's words about today and tomorrow and the third day, one of these figures is going to work. It's either going to be 1,000 years, it's either going to be a day for a year, or it'll be an indefinite amount of time. And one of them is going to make sense. The others are not going to make sense. And again, it's all about the prophecy. And this is what we went into in the last video. Christ is the prophet. They're threatening to kill him. And he would be able to gather them together, but they're killing him and the prophets that came before them. And so that's what's causing this scattering. But eventually, this scattering time would end and God's people would come back together. And the prophecies are being made plain, being able to be understood, and the gifts of the Spirit are coming back into the church. And that's causing people to gather together. Okay, what does Miller say about these words of Christ? He could not be perfected in his sufferings, for he did not suffer until more than a week after this declaration. Neither could either of the passages mean 3 days between Christ's death and his resurrection, for he is represented as healing, binding up, casting out devils, doing cures, and walking, which was not a fact, as all must acknowledge, while Christ lay in the tomb. And yet it has a meaning, for, quote, not one jot or tittle of his word can fail, close quote. Did you catch all of that? That was brilliant logic. If we're just talking about literal days, and him being perfected is referring to the resurrection, if you were going to make that assumption, that doesn't make sense because he was doing miracles, he was doing healings and things of that sort, but he was actually dead. Christ actually died for our sins, and he was no more, right? So how could he be casting out devils and doing cures and walking around when he was laying in the tomb? So it can't be literal days, so it must be a figure. And if it's figure, it must be an indefinite amount of time. It must be a day for a year, or it must be a day for 1,000 years. Okay, so we understand it's figurative. It can't be talking about literal days. It doesn't work. These days cannot mean indefinite amount of time, for the words to and third, today, and tomorrow are too clearly defined to admit of such a construction. So common sense necessitates that we can rule out indefinite amount of time. So by process of elimination, we've ruled out literal days, we've moved on to figurative interpretation, and we've ruled out an indefinite amount of time. So now that leaves us with day for a year or day for 1,000 years. The same day there came certain of the Pharisees, saying unto him, Get thee out and depart hence, for Herod will kill thee. And he said unto them, Go ye and tell that fox, Behold, I cast out devils and do cures today and tomorrow, and the third day I shall be perfected. Nevertheless, I must walk today and tomorrow and the day following, for it cannot be that a prophet perish out of Jerusalem. So again, just like last time, just like in the last video, I want to hone in on this word fox. Let's go over that. Why is Christ calling Herod a fox? And the answer is in Daniel 11:23. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. Christ says, Go and tell that fox. The fox is a cunning animal. Now, this happens, Daniel 11:23 is fulfilled in the year 161 BC. That's when they formed that league together. And 3 years later, Bacchus, the last Greek leader to rule over the Jews, was overthrown by the Maccabees. And that's important because when do we transfer down to the legs of iron, which represents the fourth kingdom in Rome? When the league was formed, or when Greek supremacy ends. I would say when Greek supremacy ends, that makes much more sense. So that would be the year 158 BC. And now we can progress into the legs of iron. Miller is continuing to speak now. The angel Gabriel, in his instruction to Daniel, and this is in 11:23, said he should work deceitfully, meaning the Roman power over the Jews. And the name fox is but another appellation for craft or deceit. Therefore he said, Go ye and tell that fox, deceitful and crafty as he is, Behold, I cast out devils, and I do cures today and tomorrow, and the third day I shall be perfected. As such, as if he said, I well know the Roman power will oppose my gospel, will tear and persecute my people 2 days, or today and tomorrow. Yet I shall do cures, bind up the wounds which they make, and cast out devils which they may employ during these 2 days, evidently meaning the same days as Hosea in our text. And the third day I shall be perfected, that is, my body, the church, shall be made perfect. They could not have begun before they became connected with the Jews. This is a really important part for understanding why the year 158 BC. They could not have begun before they became connected with the Jews, for the reason that no nation is prophesied of or noticed in the prophecies except they are somehow connected with the people of God, and for the very reason that this beast was to tread down the Jews, and finally, by cunning, deceit, and intrigue, destroy the city and the nations of the Jews, then I think the fairest conclusion is that when they became connected with the Jews by league, and when they had conquered Daniel's third kingdom, the Grecian, then and not until then had the Romans any part in this prophecy. Fair enough. So so here's the statue. What does this represent? This represents the scattering time, the treading down of God's people. First by Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and then Rome is the fourth kingdom. And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. That was Daniel 11:23. Now let's trace this arrow across to the prophecy in Daniel chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8 is the figurative. Daniel 11 is the literal interpretations of the symbols found in Daniel chapter 8. So we see this horn come up out of one of the four. Let's go to the top of the slide, top right. We see the goat. It has four horns. It had a notable horn, Alexander, that was broken, and then his kingdom was divided to the four winds, the prophecy says, and that was Egypt, Syria, Thrace, Macedonia. And there's another horn that comes up out of one of them, and that was when Rome conquered Macedonia in 168 BC. We're getting close. Then if you continue down in the prophecy, he waxes exceedingly great, and he goes to the east, he goes into the pleasant land, and he goes toward the south, he goes into the south, and so that was in Syria, in the east, BC 65, Judea 63 BC, and then eventually Egypt in BC 30. And so he conquers the whole world, the whole known world at that time. Now, in the year 161, he forms a league with the Jews. He forms a league with the Jews. And he's going to work deceitfully, though, which means he's going to go back on his word. Now, this is all recorded in First Maccabees. Now, Judas had heard of the Romans that they were mighty and valiant men, and such as would lovingly accept all that joined themselves unto them, and make a league of amity with all that came unto them. That's the very first verse of chapter 8. Now, if you jump down to verse 28, you can read this, the league, the treaty is written in this chapter. One thing that's very interesting is this verse, 28 says, neither shall victuals be given to them that take part against them, or weapons, or money, or ships, as it has seemed good to the Romans. So, in other words, we won't give aid, we won't give money, we won't give resources to those who hurt you or attack you, but they shall keep their covenants. We're going to keep our word, we're going to keep our promises, and that without deceit. They promised not to work a certain way. They promised not to be cunning. They promised not to use deceit. That was their own words. And God knew that they would use that very word. God knows even the very words that we're going to say in the future. So I have this simple timeline here. from 158 BC, we have pagan Rome right here for 666 years. And then in 508, the pagan desolation is what that stands for, was taken away. And you go 1335 years from there. So the 1335 extends from 508 down to 1844, and the 2000 years from 158 BC down to 1842. So one thing that's interesting, when Miller was talking about the 1290, which I have right here, which goes to 1798, or the 1335, those date from 508, he would set up the 508 date with the 666 years from 158 BC. But he also had another prophetic period dating from there, and that's the 2000 years of Hosea. So he had the 666-year prophecy. He also has the 2000 years of Hosea from 158 BC. So he would set up the taking away of the daily with another prophetic period. Now, this is First Maccabees chapter 9, verse 57. Top of the screen, it says, "Now when Bacchus saw that Alchemist was dead, he returned to the king, whereupon the land of Judea was in rest 2 years." Now, where in scripture do you read of a 2-year rest? With the Jubilees. You have the 49th year and you have the 50th year Jubilee. That's the only 2-year land rest. The Jews had a land rest every 7th year, and they would count out 7 sevens. So on the 49th year, 7 times 7 is 49. You'd have a rest, but then you'd also rest the following year on the 50th year, and that was the Jubilee. And so this right here, First Maccabees 9:57, is the chapter and where the chronologers tell us that is the year 158 BC. This is in the chapter where Bacchus finally surrenders and gives up. He leaves. And the Jews were in a land rest for 2 years that year. Now, why is this very, very interesting? Well, the Millerites dated the 2450, or the Jubilee cycle, from 607 BC. And if you go 3 Jubilees from that point, it takes you to 457. Hey, that's interesting, because that's when they are coming out of slavery and coming out of bondage and going back to Jerusalem and to rebuild Jerusalem and to set up the sanctuary, right? And so that happened on a Jubilee year. And if you go 6 Jubilees from that point, it takes you to the year 158 and 157, the 49th and the 50th year. And just like the chapter says, they were in rest 2 years. So 58 would be that first year, or that 49th year, and 157 would be that second year, or the 50th year. All right. So this is another good reason for us to understand the Apocrypha. The why should understand it, Miss White says, because there are these gems of truth which help substantiate the doctrine. Right? So the 2450 we can see is true. It does line up. It does line up. It is the year 607. Has to be. And it does terminate. The Jubilee cycle does end right down here. Okay. In 1844. So that is very, very interesting. So we have the 2450, the 666, which we went into in the last video, and we're looking at the 2000 years of Hosea. All of these pins, remember the very first quote, "Woe unto them that would stir a block or a pin of these messages." Right? And as you take these little pins away, it weakens the structure, it weakens the foundation. And as you put them together, the message harmonizes and it becomes more glorious, more beautiful, and it can't be gainsaid. The Bible says, "Come and let us return unto the Lord, for he hath torn and he will heal us. He hath smitten and he will bind us up." Smitten and torn, this is the same concept as scattered, trodden underfoot. Scattered, trodden underfoot. How long shall the host be trodden underfoot? Christ says, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So Gabriel's the one that's asking how long? How long are these beasts in Daniel chapter 7, as we see on the image here? How long are they going to be treading down our people? How long are they going to be ruling over us? That's what the statue represents. This is a sacred calendar. This is a sacred history. This is the great almanac of chronology. And this is represented by the 7 times of punishment as found in the book of Moses. All the prophetic periods fit into the 7 times. The 7 times is about the scattering. So is the 2,300 days. How long are we going to be trodden underfoot? That's the question that sets up the 2,300-day prophecy. So the 2,520 is about that. The 2,300 days is about that. The 2,450 is about that. They would be the reason that they were moved out of the land and they would be scattered was so that the land could rest. So the 2,520 is about the scattering, the 2,450 is about the scattering, the 2,300 days is about the scattering, and the 2,000 years is about the scattering. All of these prophetic periods fit into the 2,520. The theme is the same. God's people being scattered, being trodden, being persecuted. In the 2 days of Hosea, it says, after 2 days will he revive us. In the 3rd day, he will raise us up. So the raising us up, that's very plain. This is speaking of the resurrection. So the 3rd day must be the millennium then, because that is when we are resurrected, right? At the beginning of the millennium. It's at that time period that we are resurrected. So this is further evidence that the 2 days are 1,000-year periods because the 3rd day is connected with the resurrection. And this also harmonizes with the pioneer view on the 6,000 years that it terminated in 1844. Prophetic time is no more. But then at the end of the world, Christ will come back and the millennium will begin. If the 6,000th year terminated with the second advent, then we could trace prophetic time down to the second advent. We know what year Christ is coming back. And we have a message based on definite time. But God doesn't want the last message of mercy ever to be given to the world to be based on definite time. That's his decision. So that's why he put that gap in there. So after 2 days will he revive us. In the 3rd day he will raise us up. That's speaking of the resurrection. And we shall live in his sight. Then shall we know, if we follow on to know the Lord, his going forth is prepared as the morning, and he shall come unto us as the rain, as the latter and former rain unto the earth. So if we look at the context, so we look at the immediate context and allow every word to have its proper bearing, we want to understand, what does revive mean? The answer is being given to us in the next verse. This is speaking of the refreshing. This is speaking of the latter rain. It's the rain that causes us to go, that causes us to quicken, that causes us to spring up, that causes us to revive. Now, using Hosea to proof text Hosea. So we have an internal proof text here, which are strong. After 2 days will he revive us. In the 3rd day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. How does Hosea use the word revive? They that dwell under his shadow shall return. They shall revive. Did you, before we finish that quote, did you see that word return? Do you see that? That's the same language that's being used a few chapters earlier in chapter 6. He says, come and let us return unto the Lord. That's verse 1. Then in verse 2, he says he will revive us. Now when we go to Hosea 14:7, they that dwell under his shadow shall return. Okay, so this is speaking about us returning unto God, and they're going to revive. Okay, that's the second time you're telling us that. They shall revive as the corn and grow as the vine. The scent thereof shall be as the wine of Lebanon. What causes things to spring forth? What causes things to grow according to the Bible? You can look to Leviticus 26. You can look to a lot of chapters on this. It's the rain. It's the rain. And that's what Hosea 6 says, isn't it? He's going to revive us after the 2 days, and he shall come unto us as the rain and as the latter and former rain on the earth. So after the 2 days is the revival, right? We have a prophetic period that traces us down to a revival. Was there a revival in 1842, 43, and 44? There was. There was. Is the latter rain coming? It is. Is that after the 2 days? It is. William Foy's vision and 1843 chart, 2,000 years. We're having revivals, and the spirit of prophecy is returning. Remember that the 2,000 years of Hosea is a time when there's no prophets, when they're perishing in the church. Now let's go to Habakkuk chapter 2, where we have the prophecy of this vision being made plain upon tables. And the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. Let's just do a quick review of Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 3. The vision is yet for an appointed time. They had made the chart. The chart had the year 1843 on it for the 2520, 2300 days, and 1335. And the 1335 again says, blessed is he that waiteth and cometh to the 1335. Blessed is he that makes it through the tarrying time, and he will receive a blessing. And we know that the midnight cry comes on the other end of the tarrying time. See Matthew chapter 25. There was a cry at midnight. That happened in the summer of 1844. For the vision is yet for an appointed time. They originally had the Jewish year of 1843, which was spring March 21st, 1843, to spring to March 21st, 1844. And they never had an day or hour, but they said, hey, the prophetic periods are terminating harmoniously around this time. We expect Christ to come back at this time. At the end it shall speak and not lie. That was not true. And this is called a tarrying. Though it tarry, wait for it. Though it tarry beyond the apparent termination, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. The midnight cry came and said, hey, the 2520 actually terminates in the fall. Manasseh went into captivity in the fall. The 2300 days actually terminates in the fall. Ezra didn't arrive into Jerusalem even until the 5th month, which would have been our August. And then it necessitated some time to get the decree into effect because they had to put away all these strange wives. Right. So that was the fall too. The types and the antitypes. Christ fulfilled the spring feast at his first advent. He's going to fulfill the fall feast at his second advent. The 6,000th year. Usher has the 6,000th year. The beginning of all of this on October 23rd. Right. And the 10th day of the 7th month, or on the antitypical Day of Atonement, was October 22nd of that year of 1844. Right. And so they're like, oh, we're in this tarrying time. And the midnight cry explained all this. Okay, that's Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 3, as it pertains to the chart. The chart is being spoken of in verse 2, write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. They're being revived. They're able to go to and fro. Knowledge is increasing. This is the refreshing. This is the rest. Whom shall he teach knowledge? Line upon line, precept upon precept. And that's how we're studying now. And when you do that, you come to these conclusions about the 2,000 years, right? If you verge from Miller's rules, then you get into other ideas. Joel chapter 2, 23. Be glad then, ye children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God, for he hath given you the former rain moderately, and will cause to come down for you the rain, the former rain, and the latter rain in the first month. Couple verses down, this is the context. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. This is in fact true. Hiram Edson had a vision after the disappointment, saw Christ move into the most holy place in the heavenly sanctuary. That helped substantiate that doctrine. Ellen White, that's a daughter in Israel. She began to prophesy soon after the disappointment. William Foy's ministry began back in 1842, right then when the 2 days were ending. And that's what Hosea promised, was that we would receive the rain. We would receive these gifts after 2 days. After 2 days. Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 2. O Lord, I have heard thy speech and was afraid. O Lord, revive thy work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make known. In wrath, remember mercy. So Habakkuk is praying for a revival. He's praying for this revival. And notice that he's asking for it in the midst of the years. I wonder what years those could be. Let's go to Ezekiel 39:9. And they that dwell in the cities of Israel shall go forth and shall set on fire and burn the weapons, both the shields and the bucklers, the bows and the arrows, and the handstaves, and the spears, and they shall burn them with fire 7 years. I'm going to submit that I believe that these years that are being spoken of are the same prophetic years found in Ezekiel 39, which is also the 2520, or the scattering time. Habakkuk is praying. We need a revival. We need to return unto the Lord. We need a revival. And were there any revivals during this long 7-year period? There were. We have Pentecost. We have the Reformation. We also have of course, and also the Millerite movement, especially between the years 1842 and 1844. Those were all in the midst of the years.